just share a mic.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone.
Turn it on.
Yeah. Hello? Can you hear me? So I'm part of Advantage Solutions. We are a 100,000 person company that you've never heard of. We are private, and my role is to recruit 50,000, my team's role is to recruit 50,000 people a year. And we do that through kind of a high volume operation. So not a fun thing to say, but we run a people factory. So I have a team of ranges from about 150 to 400 people here in California, as well as in Foxborough and Manila. And that's me.
Thank you very much. Let's hear it for Adim. And I do want to just lastly mention Astad, Noel, sorry, not Adim, but Jessica are all members of our board of advisors. I did just meet Adim. He was referred to me by Astad, so perhaps that might happen too. So thank you so much for your contributions and your help, because really what their goal is just to drive the performance of our conference in a good direction. And so that means content, and that means our speakers, and so their role is pivotal to our success. So thank you so much for being part of that and your time. So I'm gonna go ahead and start off with our first question, and I'm gonna start with Noel. So Noel, competition for the talent is at an all-time high in most all sectors, and historically low unemployment is only part of the issue. Uber is a large multinational company, and they have hiring in almost every area of the business. When your hiring requirements are numerous and people are in short supply, it creates problems. How do you go about solving those problems and tackle the challenge in the age of hyper-competitive talent markets?
It's a very long question. So let's just take into the consideration that we all know that Uber just went through a lot of changes in the last couple of years, right? We have a new CEO, we have some different leadership in place, we definitely have faced up to whatever was before is no longer, and I can proudly say that that's one of the reasons I joined this company. Dara, I was telling somebody earlier, I'm a big Dara fangirl. He's an amazing CEO. I think one of our biggest selling points, if I'm recruiting recruiters specifically, is that we're building from the ground up and they get to own a lot, right, really fast. Sourcers are part of that. And we get to attract talent by giving them really complex things to solve, but we give a lot of support. Now, if we're talking about hiring engineering, for instance, after leaving Amazon where I had to hire, tens of thousands of engineers over 9.5 years, Uber has multiple new product lines that are really exciting. People want to talk about the flying car, for sure. People are excited to get Uber Eats delivered to their house. We have a product offering line that's exciting, innovative, new, and interesting, and requires a lot of intellectual horsepower to move. And so when our managers start talking to them about those opportunities, their brains start firing off with all these things. We also don't have huge number asks to deliver these products. So we're very fortunate that we have right-sized, well-scaled work to achieve in the recruiting space, like who we need to bring in. And so we offer good story. We offer sort of a rags to riches, tragedy to triumph story right now that everyone wants to ask about during the interview process. We're very transparent. We're a radically transparent company now, radically transparent. That safety, does anyone remember the safety report that just came out from Uber? We were not required to do that by any government body. We willfully and purposefully put that out in the world and hoped that our competitors would do the same so people felt safe about writing and participating in Uber's product line. Those are the kind of radically transparent things that we can offer, and people see that value and they definitely want to join. So we have a little bit of a fun story right now we can tell, some cool product offerings, some right-sized building, not over-hiring. I think it's all coming together nicely, so. Yeah, and we have more applicants, by the way, than we have to go passive source. Isn't that a weird? There are more people applying who want to join us than we have to go passively recruit. It's really fascinating to me. I'm not used to that. Amazon was like a machine, right? So, yeah.
Does maybe somebody else on our panel want to address the shortage in supply and how a strategy they may utilize for attracting talent?
Sure, I can For us, I would say that if I were to build on what Noel said, it goes back to what's becoming more and more critical. One, I think, is having phenomenal sourcers. Because when I think about Experian, we struggle with that I'm glad that many people in this room didn't think I work for the travel company. Because when I first joined, they said, oh, wow, how are you going, what are the travel benefits? I'm like, you've got the wrong company. We're Experian, not Expedia. Exactly. And yeah, I keep on thinking when you said Dara there. So, for us, it's the part of, one, having great people, but the second part, I go to where Noel says, is companies telling their story authentically. So we call it a lot, a term thrown out is the employer value proposition. Now, a challenge I can share with you, a story which we came in, is, okay, you ask a company, why should we join you? And they will give you, oh, we are a great company, we are a great place to work. Now, if I were to put a poll out, how many people in this room would say we work for a great company? Pretty much almost every hand will go up. None of us are going to say, well, I don't work for a really good company, but I still think you should join, right? So it goes back to this point of how do you differentiate yourself in the marketplace, and that becomes really, really key. It becomes, what can you tell, and what is part of the story that you can tell authentically, not saying, oh, we've got great, all of it. For example, in Experian, we talk about a couple of things which are really cool. One, flexibility. When we talk about flexibility, we say actually about 40% of our workforce works from home, right? So this is not about telecommuting. This is not about, oh, you can come into office a bit late. This is actually working from home. We talk about even those who have to come into office, and you can talk to a lot of my team out there, they can choose 1 or 2 days or 3 days a week where they work from home. So it's, again, they're not required to do that. There's a lot of flexibility. You can come in, you got a doctor's appointment, don't ask, move there. So when we talk of flexibility, we talk about it with that sense of authenticity to say it can happen. This is not something we are giving you the company spiel. It's actually out there. We talk about working on great technologies. I mean, the fact is that we have, when we talk to data scientists, we say, think about what was the big data before big data was invented as a term. Right? We had the records for 280 million Americans, already there. And this is from the 1950s. Think about that data set as compared to what is being generated now. So we've got to be able to talk that story and put it in front of candidates. And I think that can be very appealing, especially in this kind of a market space.
Excellent. Adeem?
So sorry, I just want to clarify the question, like in terms of supply and demand where there's less supply of people available, how are we dealing with it?
Yeah. How do you attract talent?
Yeah, so my answer is a little biased because we're a high volume recruiting engine. So we look at it kind of like a probability game. We accept that no one's heard of us. We accept that there's more jobs available than people looking for jobs. And so for us, what's critical is speed. And what I mean by that is speed and increasing the funnel. So we have different algorithms going through our existing database in our ATS that is passively outreaching by text that we've built and then getting people into our recruiters' calendars. And we have SLAs with every single recruiter to get back to the candidates within 1 day. Because the reality is that if you that speed is the most critical part because the best candidates are not even looking for a job, but if someone actually applied to your job and you don't get back to them in under 24 hours, you will lose them, and especially, the best candidates are off the market entirely in about 10 days because they have multiple offers, and that's probably true for professional jobs or even the jobs we recruit. So we look at it as speed, but we also look at it as expanding our channels. So we do everything from programmatic spend, but we measure the data maniacally, and what I mean by that is I can tell you the conversion rates for every single source by zip code, and we look at that and we actually do something with it to try to change our sourcing strategy. So the answer is that we just accept that it's going to be difficult, but we kind of focus on speed and what's in our control. I can't control people applying, but I can start mining more passively and control the speed on which we get back to candidates to try to convert them. And then, of course, the employee value proposition. But we take it from the approach that you probably never have heard of us. And so let me tell you about where you may have seen us and kind of the selling points in terms of flexibility and those sort of things. But it's really about speed in our world. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any questions so far? Oh, in the very, very back. Yep. Do we have any mics? Oh.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Is it a challenge to maintain the quality of the candidates who are applying?
Yeah, so define quality.
Hireable.
Well, so we look at quality in a couple different ways. The simplest way to look at it is turnover, but then you have to wonder, like, is the turnover caused post-hire, or is it caused because of a quality issue pre-hire? So then you look at turnover within the first 30 days, or you look at start time. So we started looking at, on the professional side, we measure Net Promoter Score, and it's a very simple Net Promoter Score for the recruiters. Basically, an automated thing goes out to the manager saying, would you ever recommend this recruiter to any of your friends or colleagues, period. And so that's quality in terms of internal feedback on the process, because on the professional side, we could have a great candidate, but if the process or the feeling, like again, this is my first HR job, so I apologize, I'm not an HR expert, but what I found on the professional side is that it's more about a feeling of how you felt with the recruiter, as important as the candidate quality. So we measure Net Promoter Score of the feeling, and then of course turnover. And that's how we measure quality. So what we find is we're actually looking at the correlation between those candidates that were hired faster and the turnover rate. We just got that data, but that's a great question that we're looking at, because we're actually seeing, like, does speed actually affect quality as measured, as defined as turnover? But we've actually seen our turnover come down, and that's with our wages staying flat in a rising economy. Mm-hmm.
I think we had another question to the left here. I'll just try to repeat your question. Go ahead.
I'm just curious, you guys find that being more like enterprise accounts, that contract or contract to hire is really more successful at we go, or you guys are very more direct hire?
So I just want to repeat the question. As enterprise level companies, do you prefer more contract or contract to hire versus full-time? Would that be your question?
Yeah, just pure volume. And then one more question. I didn't hear, how many people are you trying to hire a year? You mentioned that
50,000, probably 80,000 this year.
50,000 a year.
Yeah. Yeah, so
That's a lot.
so I'll take it, and I think you had. So for us, we look at contract to hire that's attractive where speed is necessary. So we don't look at contractors for our part-time workforce. That's all direct hires. But for those that are, like we have finance roles where we have a transition, or we have IT roles. Like in those situations, we like the temp to hire because you can kind of try before you buy. The challenge that we find is that the quality we don't find the same as a temp to hire versus a kind of full cycle hire. So we try to avoid it at all costs, because when you look, we actually know the unit economics in terms of cost per hire. So it's drastically different when you tie in the margin that you're paying on a contract labor, because you can convert them typically after 4 months at no cost, but the margin that you've given away, like that markup that you've given away relative to what it would cost us internally to recruit is like dramatically different. So we try to reduce that as much as possible.
Jessica, yeah, do you have some?
Yeah, just to add to that, I think that for the high volume roles, you do have to pay attention to the cost per hire, because that's where you're going to find that the contract to hire is going to be more beneficial for you, simply because it is much cheaper. I've been in organizations where we've done both. We tried the route for high volume where we hired directly, and in the end it was just far too expensive, and the time to fill, we couldn't get it done, because one, the team didn't have the bandwidth, but also we were paying so much money to agencies that if we would have just payrolled through an agency, we would have actually saved ourselves about $5,000 per hire. So for us, we made the decision that we needed to do contract to hire for our high volume. And then for the positions that are maybe not as high volume, at Activision, we do have a hybrid role that is not an FTE, but it's also not a agency contract employee as well. So we have a few different options that we can hire into, and it really just depends on the function. It depends on the number of hires that we need. And looking at the data, what has the data told us historically that makes the most sense? Doesn't make sense to go with a contractor, or is this a project that's going to take us longer than what we would be comfortable keeping a contractor on, and the cost says yes, so let's direct source ourselves.
Noelle, what's your experience there?
I prefer full-time. It's still regional dependent. So you think about a global scale, there are some regions where it doesn't make sense for me to hire full-time people because of the roles that they're doing, or we're in build mode in that region. So globally, that can change. But for sourcing roles, honestly, because there's so much growth on my plan for them, they should be full-time. And for recruiters who are working with businesses, developing relationships with the business leaders and keeping their pipeline full with people that they've talked to for over a year or two, that should be a full-time role as well. At Uber, we call it EXT. That's the contract name of it. Most of those are intended to be converted, but we're profitability focused. So we really have to think this year, especially, like, are we hiring full-timers? Is that the right decision? Or should we stay profitable and a little bit lean and flexible? And so I try to build multiple options for my leaders to look at. But I think all of us generally prefer a full-timer who has ownership in the results, who we can grow and nourish and turn into the next leader. So every person I hire, I hope I hire a next leader. I don't want to hire somebody who just sits behind their laptop and sources quietly in the corner with no growth. I'm definitely looking for people to lead from the seat that they're in and grow. So I don't think I'm going to get that from a contractor who has lots of options, unless they say, I prefer contract for reasons. I'm open to that. Like, a lot of people like to work contract on purpose. If they're rockstar talent, I'm just going to probably work with them. Yeah. But I just kind of want them to have ownership of my company.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next question in regards to data and how you use data as leaders. And, Astad, I will start with you, because at Experian is known for hosting and holding massive amounts of data. So having ownership of that has got to be something that you've mastered. And we can all admit that HR and talent acquisition is last in line to really harness and understand how to utilize data, which is really why we do a lot of these sessions, the first few that were this morning and the workshops. So my question to you is, have you taken some of that knowledge and the expertise and applied it to talent acquisition?
So I would agree, and my simple answer, of course, is yes. I think Sean's session in the morning was highly, informative. And if during a break, we actually have one of our best data specialists, Susan and Sarah, both the team, we call them dynamic duo. They literally have every report on all the data under the sun. I think, pulling it back, right? We have to practice what we preach. Now, we in Experian are a data company. We don't have any assets. I love video games, but we don't sell any. So, it's like all we have is we have this massive amount of data. We add on top of that analytics, right? Because the data is available with us and some few other competitors. So the differentiation is innovation and analytics. You take that data, you make sense out of it, and then with that, you actually sell it to our customers. That's what we're about, and we make about $3 billion doing that. So if you take it back to talent acquisition, what I feel really good about, and I actually think that the industry has made progress. So, we talk about, ATS systems, we talk about CRMs. I think we're moving to a world where there's an overload of data, and I'm sure many of you have felt that or seen that, right? There's just so much data out there. It's been constantly generated. In that context, what happens is actually it becomes challenging to figure out what that data really means and getting some sense out of it. So I'll share with you, a funnier story. So sometime back when I, joined Experian, I said, okay, how do I know everything's going well? And they said, oh, we've got a dashboard. I'm like, yes. And then I opened up the dashboard, and this dashboard turned out to be 16 tabs with 14 charts on each tab. And I was literally scratching my head to figure out how do I make any sense out of that, right? So this was, and literally overnight we gave this to Susan and Sarah, and they generated a 2-page report within a matter of days. Now, this is the point. What is a dashboard? It's meant to be a dashboard, right? If I were to get a compendium each month of saying, hey, here's how you're doing, we're not making any progress. We just don't know what's important. So the dashboards, how do you simplify data and how do you really take out those chunks which really make a difference and make a difference to our hiring managers or to leadership? That's my job. So my job is taking that data, taking that dashboard, and interpreting it in a way that my managers and my senior leaders can make decisions for us. And I think that's the challenge for us in TA. Because today, we probably have a lot of data. We have tons of data on candidates and applications and processes, all of that. Are we being able to use that to make better decisions on TA? Or versus, say, hey, let's get some more data out there?
Yeah, okay.
I'll just add to that really quickly. I teach data use at a very junior level. Like, I want people who are brand new sourcers who've never done this job before to start using data to make compelling discussions. So I'll give you a very basic example so you understand where it starts from us. Does anyone else do the debrief after you interview somebody? Everyone meets in a room, you have a debrief process. Usually recruiters don't speak up a lot in debriefs when I've experienced that. Mine do. My sourcers and my recruiters are empowered to do that. And the way that they use small bits of data is to prevent biases from happening in the room, right? So someone will make an assumption where they're like, I feel that, I get the feeling that this person may, and I'll be, whoa, back that up with data. Did you ask a question where you actually have data to support that discussion? And when they say no, I go, take it off the record. That doesn't count. Learn how to interview better. And so my sourcers know that that's where they start showing up using data, where they go, whoa, that's not a data-driven decision. That's assumptive or conjecture. And I teach them the words assumption, conjecture, bias, and they call it out right in front of the hiring manager and the interview team immediately. And then that starts to empower them to say, everything I build from here has to have data to back it up. That includes them making sure the data is right. So if the data is wrong, I'll say, were you positive that data is correct? What's your resource? And then as we move up into the next level of their role, they're having discussions with hiring managers about where they're going to find people, how much time and effort they're going to put into it. Data is part of that decision-making process as well. So if you start at a very junior level and you empower them with data, their funnel metrics get cleaner. Their ability to show their work gets cleaner. The hiring managers stop inferring biases in scenarios where I think that's a really big use of data right now because there's so much available, like you said. That's where we're doing a bad job at using data, is to block biases. We do a lot of paper writing in my space in what we do, and they hate the 26-page documents that come, but it's appendices full of data. 3 pages of what we're going to do, and 28 pages of appendices with data in it. So I just encourage you to think of it on the macro level as well as the micro level.
Pick one product that you think can be effective and help you in a couple different ways, and I would start from there.
Could I add to that?
Yes, please.
So I think, one thing that I see with technology is kind of bright, shiny object syndrome, where a lot of us feel like we got to chase every new technology. I would say the one piece of advice I'd give you is to really be specific about the type of problem you're trying to solve, because you may not need technology. And what I mean by that is, like when we looked at chatbots as one example, we were really specific that we don't just want a chatbot for applicants coming our way and going through scripted chat. We want a bot to go into our database, find passive candidates, match them, text them, integrate into Outlook, and actually find an open slot on the recruiter's calendar so that we eliminate and make a recruiter more efficient. And then, with most vendors, when you're really specific about the problem and you've done the baby steps of data and you measure where your baseline is, most vendors will, and I know every vendor is going to hate me, will be willing to do a pilot to say, okay, let's prove it out. Let me pay very little investment up front. I have my baseline in terms of my speed or my recruiter productivity as measured by the number of hires they're doing per day or whatever it is, and say, let's see if that moves the needle, because then the budget conversation is a lot simpler. You may not even need budget. You may be able to find efficiency and fund it that way. But you got to be really specific about the problem you're trying to solve up front. So are you trying to solve a problem of not getting enough inbound? Well, Uber's not trying to solve that, and neither is Amazon. We're trying to solve that. So you got to be really specific about it.
I do a lot of the purchasing suggestions I worked on tools and implementations at Amazon, so that's a very big company to work on implementations for. The advice I give a small company who's growing is the same advice that we look at when we're looking at, like, can an engineer code? Logical, scalable and maintainable, right? It needs to make sense for the time that you need it now. It needs to make sense for the time that you're going to need it in a year or two from now. So don't buy for current problems, buy for long-term solutions, even if you're swinging a little outside of your comfort zone on dollars. If you know that you're buying something that is scalable and manageable next year and the year after. So I ask very difficult questions of vendors. I don't think there's a vendor that's is in this room who sat across the table from me during a negotiation, but I don't want to talk to salespeople. I want to talk to product managers. I always suggest this. Don't talk to the salespeople. Talk to the PMs and the engineers and the people who are building the back end of it so that you can ask questions like, if this happens, can you build this? If this happens, can you customize this? I want to know what the real solutions are, not the value prop of the tool. So I do a lot of negotiation that way, so that's a great way to enter that conversation is just, sure, your salesperson can come, but they get 5 minutes, and then I want to talk to your PMs. And then I want to talk about what you can do long term. And then the other thing is buy something that solves a lot of the problems, even if it doesn't solve all of them, but know that you're probably going to change technologies every 2 to 5 years, except for maybe the ATS where legally it's a lot harder to change that. And so buy things where APIs can easily sit on top of that technology. Buy things where you can bolt on new technology with ease, so new implementations go easier. And you can only free source your way to so much. So a lot of these free tools are cool, but they only get you halfway down the road and they don't scale. So don't fall for the free sourcing all the time, even if that's in your budget. I would go to the mattresses and ask for more budget wherever you can and make good data-driven cases for it. So, but please buy things that are going to solve next year's problems, not just your current piece of pain.
I have a question. In running a staffing agency, we had always used an applicant tracking system. And I was pulling in just resumes from everywhere. And what I found is a lot of junk ended up in the applicant tracking system. And then when we were emailing our so-called candidates, we were suddenly getting hot lists from India and stuff, and I was just like, there's spam, fake resumes in my applicant tracking system. We ended up having to dump it. And it's just one of those mistakes that you make. And then there's always that question of, at what point do I need to have a CRM and as well as the applicant tracking system? And my question maybe is that really for the nurturing of those candidates who aren't a fit right then, that you're sending out, I don't know, whether it's email newsletters or pamphlets or, maybe it's more of an employer branding solution? Anybody have the...
What problem are you trying to solve with that?
So at some point you have an applicant tracking system, right? That's just housing all your resumes. And then at another point you say, okay, in addition to the applicant tracking system, let's also add on a CRM that's just gonna house all of our candidates who aren't appropriate for these positions, and maybe we're gonna nurture them through marketing programs, emails, that talk about our company or upcoming events. Is the CRM really more for those marketing nurturing
it's
solutions?
for building your talent pool, nurturing, and then getting them engaged later on. But you
I
could
can
solve it with your ATS nowadays if you have a large enough ATS.
Yeah, I think ATSs are moving in that direction, but I'll share with you where we solve for our CRM, right? So we have a Teleo base with a telemetry CRM. Now, here's the challenge. Many times if you have a CRM and you're just like, oh, we'll use it to do that without having an actual plan to do it, it's going to fail. When we focused our CRM on pipelining, and we used it to say, okay, we are going to start building pipelines for skill sets in the CRM and use that to track interactions with each candidate, it changed. Utilization changed, the way people thought about the CRM changed, etc. So I think at many points of time, it sounds really cool. And to be honest, it could almost be embarrassing for some company to say, you guys have a CRM, right? I'm like, yeah, sure. I've seen lots of companies make decisions to do CRMs because hey, that's the thing to do. But it became this point of how do you really integrate it into a process? Going back to the whole conversation we had technology, it is so easy, the bright, shiny object. Go for it because it seems really cool. Seems like everybody else is doing it. Guess what? Uber's doing it. Activision's doing it. So we should be doing it too. But unless it fits into the recruiter's process cycle, unless it fits into your TAP cycle, guess what? It is going to be a nice tool. It'll be lying outside. And every 3 months, you'll be saying, why aren't we utilizing it more? Why aren't we utilizing it more? So I almost think that before you go into technology as a solution, you've got to think about what is it that the process really wants to drive. And then the point of execution, where how does it get part of the process? How do you ensure that you're focusing on that, and that delivers the value from a CRM?
If you're not using your CRM because it's painful, I don't know, who has a CRM that they just hate? Go ahead, raise your hand, it's cool. It's a branding tool for a lot of companies, right? Because you can do campaigns on it. For us, it's a great branding opportunity. We do not have our CRM purchased right now, and I'm the CRM purchasing person right now. So I'm evaluating all the CRMs, and I help implement the most recent one before I left Amazon. So it's painful when it's not purchased right. And I do like that you said, some people think that you should just have a CRM to have a CRM because that's what everyone's doing. And a lot of leaders are like, why don't we have a CRM? Go buy one. And I'm like, tell me the 5 things we're trying to solve with it, like you said. If it's branding, if it's campaigns, if it's nurture, if it's all that. But please buy something that works with our ATS seamlessly so that my sources and recruiters don't feel like they have to go into one more system, right? Like, if you're touching 3 systems a day, it's exhausting. If you're touching 4 systems a day, it's untenable. Anything after that's just crazy, right? 2 is enough. 2 is plenty. But unfortunately, that's just not the way the big enterprise tools are building their program or their technology. We have to have 2 or 3 things sitting on top of something else, which is why the bolt-ons and the APIs are really useful if they feed right into your applicant tracking system. But I also want to call out that if you work for an OFCCP company, who has OFCCP in there? Okay. So you have to differentiate between passive and active candidates very clearly when you're OFCCP compliant, right? And so CRMs are a great place to house that passive candidate where no decisions are being made, and then as soon as they become active, you have to move them into an applicant, process. That's where CRMs have an added value for people who are trying to build passive pipelines that are clearly differentiated from active pipelines and are compliant and the governance works and you don't get audited and pay lots of fines. So how do I know that? Maybe there was a company I worked for recently. Maybe we got audited a few times. Maybe it was unfortunate that I had to sit in those meetings, but I will encourage you to use CRMs for the purpose that they're driven for when you're OFCCP and get really clear on where the differentiating lines are between those 2 things.
Yeah. One of the ways, just real quickly, one of the ways that we use it at Activision, our CRM, is for our executive recruiting. They are in it almost more than they're in the ATS. And so for us, just because it's a passive candidate, and our sourcing function uses our CRM far more than they do our ATS sometimes too, or certain times of the year. But that's where we use it a lot, is with our executive recruiting function.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Do you post pipeline recs in the CRM separate, or is it mostly just through sourcing?
I'm just going to repeat it. Do you post pipeline sourcing?
Pipeline recs in the CRM, or do you actually just let people source through it?
No, so we do post pipeline recs, and we actually have that on our ATS as well to be able to build in candidate bases so that we can actually invite candidates to join our pipeline as well.
Yep.
Any other questions? We got about 10 more minutes. I wanted to ask just a general question to our panel as we kind of sum up here. We've talked about a lot of technologies, and what I think I would be interested in is if maybe there was a technology you felt that you see that is very innovative. That's what we're talking about, innovative technologies here. I don't know if it's VR or We'll start with you, Astad. Is there a trend or a technology out there that you see as being the next big thing that's going to replace this or that, or what are your thoughts?
There's a lot of thoughts. And again, just going straight off the bat, particularly for entry-level positions and some positions which are not as highly skilled, I think the ability for artificial intelligence to come in for first-line screening is something that definitely is very attractive for us. So for example, we run some call centers, both here in the United States as well as in Costa Rica. And I think the one piece, which is becoming increasingly, smart, is when you think about how we use voice tools, Alexa, Siri, etc. Think about Alexa interviewing you or Siri interviewing you, right? And I actually feel that there's some level where some of these companies and some of the startups that I see have become increasingly sophisticated at being able to figure out things like candidate disposition. And particularly when you think about a call center, I go back to Noel's point. It's actually data, tangible data about how a person's voice modulates, et cetera, that you could actually use as a basic screening tool. Now, there are some watch-outs as well about biases that can come into AI, and we read a lot about that. But for me, that becomes increasingly more valuable, and I'd be keen to hear Adim's thoughts because that's again a big focus area that comes into entry-level recruitment and lower-skilled recruitment.
Okay, Adim.
So we've been using AI, machine learning, and NLP for about 3 years now, and we were really early with these startups. And originally, I was like, yes, this is going to replace all recruiters. But now I'm at the point where it's going to be very difficult. And we actually did look at voice-based AI. So you're talking to a Siri equivalent. But we're still on kind of text, and we've tested all the vendors. We've tested Olivia, Maya, TechRecruit. What I think in terms of evolution of this is that there's just too many tools out there. I think the next 5 to 7 years, it's going to consolidate, because to be a very efficient recruiter, whether you're doing high volume, whether you're doing tech, you have to, number one, understand search engine optimization, search engine marketing, optimize your job descriptions, understand how to source, have chatbots, have a CRM, have ATS. Then, if you look at kind of the experience within these ATSs, you have Amazon, the candidates are conditioned to a frictionless experience where it's one-click buy, transparency with Uber, where if my Uber is even 5 minutes late, I'll just cancel it. Yep. So they expect that level of transparency. And now imagine when you start applying to a job at any of your companies, it's I even cringe filling out 2 forms now. I'm just conditioned to that. But these ATSs, and due to legal reasons and whatever, it's just really long. So I think there'll be consolidation of the tools. I think there'll be a lot more simplification of the candidate experience, where it's just that frictionless experience in applying. So I don't think it'll be kind of the next big thing, but I think it'll be a lot of consolidation of things where it's TA in a box. Because right now you have to stitch together a lot of the tools, and and that includes everything from, we have an enterprise data warehouse, I have Alteryx, I have BI, tools to get our data out. All that will be kind of in a box, I think, in 5 to 7 years.
Oh, thank goodness. Noelle, any thoughts there?
I'm a big fan of deep machine learning. So, and I explain it to people that automation is one thing where you're taking tasks off your plate, and that's automation. AI is mimicking the human brain to do things the way that I would do them if I had the time to do it. So, and taking sourcers off of those menial tasks through automation or through some AI tools can give them more high-value tasks to achieve and to also scale them up. So we talked about that on our call and on the podcast, where I just want sourcers to be better at their job and let the deep machine learning do it. We work with a lot of engineers, pulling engineers into our company is super important, as most of you are looking for solid engineers. And so we have somebody who does assessments here. Assessment tools that can also evaluate systems design is massive for me, because that is the crunchiest part of getting engineers into our roles. Both when I was at Amazon, that was our biggest fail, I think, when people come on site and they can't demonstrate they have a clear understanding of systems design. So, and it's hard to build tools, and I think Hacker can say that back there, it's hard to build tools to evaluate those types of things. That's more of an in-person action, but I think it's possible. And once you can eliminate the people who are not capable of meeting the bar quickly, you simplify your pipeline, the pipeline moves a lot faster. But any tool that simplifies a task Yes, but I agree with you. There's so much noise out there right now, and I'm excited about it actually, because all of you creating tools all of our vendors that are standing back there are differentiating yourselves from other people. And I see in the next 2 to 3 years, we'll probably start to see some standouts in machine learning. And I'm not worried about people not having jobs, right? I'm not worried about my sourcers not having jobs. I just want to change what they focus on and change how they do their work. So I don't have fear of the bots, so to speak. But deep algorithms also get bias. Okay, so I'll give you an example. I'm sitting in a workflow meeting for an ATS. I'm not going to name the ATS. We're with the ATS partner. We're doing mapping out the entire workflow, and you'd be surprised how many places there are as you map the workflow where biases can come into play, where you're like, oh, it's not important, let's skip that, let's do this evaluation, not that evaluation. So we build from the ground up our entire workflow. And it shocked me that a human is still responsible for building all those workflow processes and then giving that over to our ATS team to say, build this for us. And I had to keep throwing the compliance flag down, nope, can't do that because you'll eliminate these people. Nope, can't do that. You're making assumptions about our applicants. I think we have to get to the point where we are reducing biases in workflow processes and stop assuming that all these big companies are doing it right. They're not. Because this is a very well-known ATS that's used by many large companies, and I caught 30 things in an hour. I was like, nope, nope, and nope. So there's still a place for humans to get involved in that tool set, so we have to be really mindful of that. But once we've mastered reducing biases, we can maybe then start creating tools that are a little bit more fluid in the machine learning space. But machine learning also gives opportunity for influencing bias as well, as we've heard somebody may have heard this story from the way back. By the way, I can tell you the real story that happened in Amazon if you ever want to know it. It wasn't as bad as they made it out in the media. But that's a good place to learn that exercise is in test mode, which it was. It was in test mode, and figure out what's it doing and then make better choices on the tools that you're buying and the tools that you're purchasing. Also, one final thing. I have a really big problem with tools that tell me that they can help me identify diversity. When I look at the people selling me the tools, there's no diversity. If you tell me that you can help me bring more females or underrepresented people to my company, but I'm looking at your company and you have no females on your staff and you have no underrepresented people on your staff, I'm not buying your tool. You're not good at it. So please, by all means, if you're going to pitch me, I better see those people sit in the room with me, and I want to see more female leaders on your tech staff, because it's really hard for me to believe that you can build for me what you could not build for yourself.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's a soapbox under this chair. You didn't see it.
You gotta hear the podcast.
It's my final word.
How are we doing on time? Is it 2 o'clock yet? Oh, 2 o'clock. We have 1 minute.
Sorry.
Jessica, did you want to add anything to that as we sum up?
I mean, I don't have a soapbox under here, so I don't really know that I can add anything more other than to say, I still love Calendly, so there's that.
I love Calendly too.
I mean, I think
Game
that
changer.
they all said what I would say too. I mean, there's so many things out there that I'm waiting for the day to come that everything is condensed into maybe 3 products for me to pick from, and hopefully it's not bright and shiny, and if it is, then I'll probably grab it. So.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank all of our leaders for being here. And, as we're finishing up here, we really do have to recognize just how far we've come in technology. I mean, from having an applicant tracking system on your desktop, then to having it stored in the cloud, and then now you can have it on your mobile device. We've come a long way. And to your point, the space is very crowded. There's lots of tools out there. And certainly the VC market for these tools and the funding is hot, super hot for these new ideas. And there's lots of acquisitions that are happening. So it's an exciting time for hiring. It's a huge market. So anyway, let's hear it for our leaders. Thank you so much.